I just want to do God's will.
What you're seeking is a blessing from God.
You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to July on Life Today Live. Great to have you, and we're going to hit some big issues in our country here. Whether they'll have ramifications in other countries in Canada or not, we'll just wait to see. But we've seen a lot of things here with the Supreme Court lately. If my count is correct, 32 decisions handed down in June alone, some more things coming down even today. It's been an historic session. And I wanted to talk about this, so I put a call out earlier this week, and my number one choice was gracious enough to be with us today. He is America's Constitution coach. His name is Rick Green. He is the co-host of Wall Builders Live with David Barton, so you'll probably recognize his voice. He's also the founder of Patriot Academy, and he served the great state of Texas here as a state representative. And I am glad to have him to get some insight because there's a lot of issues, not just Roe versus Wade. There are many other issues that are significant. So we're going to dive right in. Chat is open, Judy. Great to have you. Happy Canada Day. I don't know what that means, but I hope you have a great one. And let's dive into this, and you can be a part of the conversation. Rick, great to have you on Life Today Live.
Hey, Randy, good to be back with you, man. What a great day. And for such a time as this, brother, really good stuff happening right now.
All right, we will get to, obviously, the Dobbs case, Roe versus Wade, overturned. Everybody knows that. But there are several other that I'm not sure everyone else understands that deal with religious freedom, Second Amendment, some things that have to do with bureaucratic power, such as the CDC, OSHA, the EPA. A lot of stuff going on. Let's just dive in. You pick your topic. You pick your favorite topic here.
Oh, man. I feel like a kid in a candy store. I mean, it has truly been remarkable, you know, and of course we were all focused on the Dobbs case, but the day before that, when the Bruin case came out, and actually a few days before that, the school choice case out of Maine that said you can't discriminate against people for teaching religion. So if you're going to have a school choice program and you give the parents those dollars to be able to pick the best school for their kid, you can't rule out a school just because they teach religion at that school. A textbook First Amendment case decided the right way. I mean, you know, we've watched this stuff for 60 years, longer than I've been alive. The court has been making up law. They've been making up theories. They've been doing all these complicated tests to get the end result that they want because the Constitution did not support the left-wing agenda that they pushed through. And now it's just case after case after case that Alito and Thomas are essentially dismantling 50 years of bad legal theories and left-wing philosophy being pushed on America through the courts. So the Bruin case was the big one for me because they just, I mean, Thomas, as always, he's my favorite, always has been. He took me to school. When I'm reading the opinion, I'm learning the history. I'm learning the history of the Second Amendment. I'm learning the history of constitutional rights, the proper role of the federal government in this. It was just amazing. And it hinted at, didn't hint at, I mean, it specifically said, we're going to stop these crazy legal theories and we're going to get back to restoring the Constitution. And of course, we had all read the leaked version of Sam Alito's opinion on Dobbs, and it was the same thing. It was just all the history that we've talked about, all the bad legal theories, and pointing out this is why Roe v. Wade was so wrongly decided. It wasn't just that it allowed you to take innocent life. It was also just the legal theory that was used, the lack of history, the fact that they would be willing to make up a constitutional theory, substantive due process, in order to get the outcome that they want. I'm just giddy, man. I'm reading these opinions and I'm geeking out, going, wow, I did not think in my lifetime, not only did I not think in my lifetime we would overturn Roe v. Wade, I did not think in my lifetime I would read a federal actor saying, meaning a federal official saying, I don't have authority to do what you want me to do, right? Because for all of our lives, everybody's run to the government and said, solve this problem. And every government official at every level has said, I'll take care of that for you. Instead of saying, do I have authority under the Constitution to do this? And they're asking that question, Randy. That is huge. It's a sea shift. It's tectonic. It's a total game changer in how government works.
All right. You mentioned a phrase there that I actually want to hit, and just stick with me if you're in the audience there. When I went to Yale Law School and walked around the campus, I thought it was beautiful. I never went to actual law school and attended, but there's this substantive due process that you mentioned. And I was reading Thomas's opinion on that as well, because the left was really hating on him. And I'm like, I know that there was, I think it was NBC or Reuters, somebody put out a thing saying that this latest Justice Ketanji Brown, if I'm getting that right, was the first black justice. And everybody's like, hello, Clarence Thomas is right over there. And then there was this guy back in 67. There was this Thurgood Marshall guy. But anyway, they corrected that. But they're going after him because of what you're talking about, which is the way that the Supreme Court has allowed themselves to rule, such that they're making law instead of interpreting law. That's right. That if the court shifts to a constitutional interpretation of the cases in front of them, does that not change everything we've known in our lifetimes?
It does, man. It does on virtually every issue. And that's basically what Thomas said. He essentially said, bring them to me. Come and get the good stuff, because we're dismantling this crazy stuff. And I'm a country boy, man. I like it simple. I hate these crazy, complicated. I mean, even if we want to talk about the Kennedy case and the lemon test, they squeezed the last bit of juice out of that ridiculous lemon test. That's gone. But this substantive due process thing, it's in the weeds, but let me just say this about it. It was the tool that was used to make up constitutional rights. So they actually took a clause out of the Constitution that didn't list specific rights. It wasn't saying here's a bunch of new rights. It was saying if you're going to be deprived of life, liberty, or property, there has to be due process before that can happen. It's not saying you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, and property. If you commit a bunch of murders or crimes or whatever, we can deprive you of your liberty. We can put you in jail, potentially give you the death penalty, but we have to have a due process there. You can be deprived of property. In the Fifth Amendment, you can have your property taken by eminent domain, but there has to be compensation and there has to be due process. And so that's what the clauses were intended to do. What the left did was they basically took those clauses and they said, well, if we stand just right and we kind of close one eye, we can twist ourselves into a pretzel, and we can say that because of that due process clause, that you have to have due process, there's probably a bunch of other rights that you need due process for, and we want to create a right to abortion, so we're going to squeeze that one in there. And there's a lot of cases that have used substantive due process. Oberfeld and the whole gay marriage case was based on the exact same thing. So for Thomas to not just basically say, he said we should revisit Griswold, Oberfeld, all of these cases that were decided on substantive due process, and he didn't say we wouldn't. He didn't say we would reverse ourselves on contraceptives, right? Like that's what they're all going after him for, Whoopi and everybody else. They're saying, oh, he wants to get rid of contraceptives. That's not what he said. He's saying we don't need to use that legal theory. If there's a right to something, then we need to look at places where rights are described, not make this thing up in the wrong clause. So that's what that's all about. And you're right. They are, oh my goodness, they're making up all kinds of stuff. And by the way, they're showing their racist colors as well, because they're calling him every name in the book. Yeah. And it's because they're unhinged at this point. They know how big this is. You said it exactly right. This changes everything. Yeah. And it's virtually every issue now where the court inserted itself and changed America without the elected representatives, without we the people asking for it. The court changed America dramatically over the last 60 years. And what Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas are doing, and obviously with the votes of Gorsuch and Barrett, and sometimes Roberts is jumping in there as well. But they're doing exactly what you said. They are changing everything in a positive way. They're becoming constitutional once again. Okay,
Here's an interesting thing that I've noticed, and tell me if I'm right, because you're America's Constitution coach. I'm not. This J6 posse, right, where we're going out to get Trump and whoever's in the way, right? Part of their rhetoric is, democracy is being threatened, and part of me is like, okay, we're a constitutional republic, we're not a democracy, but we do have democratic elements in the way we choose our leaders and vote on certain laws state by state. But yet, what the Dobbs case did, and what Thomas is talking about, and these other ones, Oberfeld, and then the contraception one that you mentioned, So gay marriage, contraception, abortion are the kind of the three that are mentioned. But what they're saying is that we're going to let the people of the states decide. In other words, empower the people through democracy. And I think the gay marriage advocates are a little freaked out because there was not a state that ever voted for gay marriage. Even California failed multiple times. Are we going to have more power in the people's hands, state by state, because of these rulings?
Yeah, and even to your point about not being a democracy, I'm in Florida right now. I'm actually up at the top floor of the state capitol here, and I've got young people here from all over the region doing what we call a leadership congress. And we just did a workshop. They are on the House floor debating the issues of the day, but we just did a workshop on exactly what you just said. What is a constitutional republic versus a democracy? The founders called democracy a mobocracy, the greatest of evils. Not only do we want to be a republic that elects its representatives to go do that work and represent us, but we want to be a constitutional republic that limits those representatives in what they do, that they only get to work on certain things, and those are the things specifically listed in the Constitution, which of course is what these decisions are saying. And for the court to say we don't have authority under the Constitution to decide these certain things, and so we're giving that back to the states, that is genuine federalism. That is going back to allowing the diversity of the states. And what's funny to me, Randy, is these people that are protesting in New York and California over the Dobbs decision, they now have the freedom to actually have more abortion than they had before. This takes off the limits of Roe v. Wade, which I'm not saying that's a good thing. I would love to have a life amendment. I would love to have a decision that said the 14th Amendment protects your life and you can't take away that child's life. I'd love to have, I don't think we can get there politically right now, but these people in California and New York, they're going to have almost unlimited abortion. They're going to be passing laws that allow partial birth abortion. It's going to be bad. So it's silly that they're protesting the Dobbs decision. Let them go do their thing in California. We'll do our thing in Texas, everybody. And that will create federalism where people can vote with their feet and move to states that reflect their values and move out of states that don't reflect their values. And I do think, Randy, eventually life will sweep this country. We're gonna have a restoration of a respect for life. And those states that are purple, I think we're going to have big battles over abortion in those states, and I think we'll ultimately win those. I think history's on our side on this. The science has shown so many people that were saying, well, I don't know if it's life or not, and now they see those images, those 4D images. They see these babies surviving at 20 weeks, and it's just amazing. And so hearts and minds are changing. It's going to take time. But yeah, that idea of giving it back to the states is more freedom, more flexibility, and more diversity across the country, which I think is healthy. And I don't think we stay together as a country if we don't do federalism. We're so split, we're going to end up in a civil war if we don't allow states to have kind of their own personalities. One reason I support Convention of States is to overrule a lot of these federal programs that have micromanaged and told everybody what to do. But I tell you what, the court right now, by returning to constitutional interpretations as originally intended, in many ways, they're restoring federalism for us, which is good because they're the ones that took it away in the first place.
Yeah, and I want to hit some of those cases here real quick, but I have a question for you. Do you think that the angst on the left over having more power in the people's hands is born out of ignorance? Like they just don't understand, they're only watching The View or something, and so they completely don't understand the law? Or is it because they have a desire to rule over other people?
Yes, to both.
Both.
I do think there's a high level of ignorance for sure. And frankly, for all of us as Americans, we're civically ignorant, biblically ignorant. It's why we're in the mess we're in. But ignorance is curable, and we can learn these things. It's one thing one of the reasons I'm so optimistic right now is I see all these people studying the Constitution and getting back into these things, studying the Bible again to say, how should the culture work? But I think what they really are afraid of is I think they know that their issues, they will not win through persuasion and with the people. They only win through force. It's the whole cultural Marxist way. It's violence. It's whatever they can do to distract. They have to silence the opposition. That's why you see all this stuff that's happened in the last couple of years. If we actually have the chance to reason, if we actually have the chance to do what Patrick Henry said in his Give Me Liberty, Give Me Death speech, he started with, according to the magnitude of the subject, ought to be the freedom of the debate, and only in that way can we find truth. When we have the freedom of debate, we win because truth is on our side. That's why they have to silence and shut down. So they don't want this coming back to the people, even in their blue states. So instead of celebrating the fact that they get to decide, They're worried that the elites in their state won't get to decide because even the people in their state. Just imagine if all the pastors in California started standing up right now and saying, we have a chance to prevent abortion even in California.
Yeah.
If the church is engaged in California right now in the way that they have the ability to, it's game over there as well. And I think that's what the elites are afraid of.
I think so too. I mean, power to the people. You as Christians, we've always said, well, you can change the law all you want, but you have to change the hearts and minds of people. That's and right. That is true. Yeah. But it's also true that if you change people's hearts and minds, but the law you can do nothing about, you're limited. And now we have the opportunity to try to convince our neighbors, even in California or New York or wherever. We have this opportunity to have the conversation in a way that can actually impact the law. Finally, power to the people. Okay, I want to show people your website. Yes. This is patriotacademy.com. You heard Rick reference what he's doing right now down in Florida and training people. And we need a little more. We need a little more understanding of the way things work, especially when the government backs off and lets us have our own destinies in our own hands. There's a few
people are hungry for it too, Randy. It's like it's like this time where it's maybe a window. I don't know how long the window will be open, but people's eyes are open. I think it's because we experienced so much tyranny over the last couple of years, and we saw things we never thought we would see in America, and that shook a lot of people out of their slumber. I mean, when churches were closed and just all the crazy stuff that happened. And so we're seeing it definitely at Patriot Academy. We've got 13,000 Constitution coaches now that are hosting the Biblical Citizenship in Modern America class in their living rooms or at their churches. So people are coming in and say, okay, if I'm a Bible-believing Christian, I got to know what the Bible says about citizenship. And then if I'm an American, I got to know what the Constitution says about it. And so we're teaching them those things. Then they're going out running for school board, running for office, or helping candidates. I've never seen anything like this, man. I've been at it 30 years. I've never seen this level of interest and willingness to learn. And even non-believers that I've ran into a guy at the Ark the other day. We were out there doing an event with Kirk Cameron, and this guy comes up, and he's a pastor in Connecticut, and he says, I'm doing your BibCit class, your biblical citizenship class. And this atheist or agnostic comes in the first day of class, and he says, I don't agree with you people on anything, you're on your faith, all that stuff. But he said, I know the left is destroying America right now, and I know they hate you, so that means I must need to team up with you. And this guy ends up in the 5th week of the class, he gives his life to the Lord, and in the 8th week on the final night, they baptized him at a Constitution class. So, I don't know, man. I think God's just doing some amazing things right now.
That's fun. All right. I do want to get your opinion on some of these cases related to the EPA, OSHA, CDC, which has limited their power, and I don't mean like they should have more power. In other words, they overreached in these areas, and now through several cases, the Supreme Court has said you don't have that authority.
Yeah, and what the court really looked at here, they narrowly looked at, did Congress authorize you to create this climate change plan? And the details of it, they basically said we're going to make the entire industry of energy reduce coal as a percentage of our overall industry in the country. I forget the numbers. I think it was 37% down to 28%, which doesn't sound like a lot if you're not in that arena. Devastating to the industry. Like, it caused tens of thousands of jobs to be lost, coal plants to be shut down, caused our energy grid to not grow even though our number of people is growing. I mean, it's been an absolute disaster. But to think that a fourth branch, I call them the fourth branch, the agencies they're not the executive, they're not the legislative, they're not the judicial, they technically come under the executive, and they're created by the legislature, but they become a world unto themselves. They even have their own administrative law. I mean, it's a bad situation. So they're spending trillions of dollars with no real accountability, and they're making up things on their own as well. Yeah. And so what the court looked at was not, is the EPA constitutional? That's what I wanted them to look at, because I don't think they're authorized under the Constitution. But what they looked at is, did the EPA do something beyond what Congress told them to do? Yeah. And that's essentially what they found was, hey, you guys can't suddenly make up rules that change the entire energy industry. Congress didn't give you that authority. They gave you authority to go into one particular plant and if there was a problem, deal with that particular problem. So it's a big case, because that's not something just the EPA does. I mean, think about what the CDC has done. The Center for Demented Confusion has assumed among the powers of the earth, as the Declaration would say, a separate and equal station. And the laws of nature and nature's God did not give it to them. So I'm just paraphrasing the Declaration. But the CDC decided that they could tell you whether or not you could charge rent or kick out someone that's not paying their rent. The CDC created all these new rules for themselves. Now, on that one, I think the court has failed to strike them down as much as they should. But the philosophy behind this EPA decision is huge. They're basically saying they call it the major doctrines or major decision doctrine. Major issues doctrine. I'm blanking on what that middle word is. Anyway, and it's basically, if it's a big thing that's going to have a big impact on the culture and the economy, Congress has to be very clear saying, we're giving you authority to do this. And they obviously didn't do it for EPA, but it fits in a lot of other areas. I think we'll see decisions where we're going to challenge the Department of Education, Agriculture, all these fourth branch entities that have been doing things they've never had the authority to do. Yeah, and you throw out another phrase, they're fourth branch entities. We've got three branches of government, supposedly, basically the president, the Congress, and the courts. But what you're saying is that there's this fourth branch, which would be this bureaucratic group of unelected officials that basically make laws. And like the rent thing in that case, like the EPA in the West Virginia versus EPA case, as well as some of the OSHA, utilizing OSHA to push a lot of things. Does this hit the vaccine mandates? Any of these cases? Do you know? Unfortunately, they did not hear the case out of New York that would have allowed for religious exemptions to the vaccine. Thomas did do a dissent. Thomas and Alito and Gorsuch said we should have taken this case, because they're basically saying if you're secular and you have a medical exemption, you can still work at the hospital and you can still do all your things. You just have to, whatever their protocols would be. But if you're not getting the vaccine because of your religious objection to aborted, to fetuses being used in the vaccine, well, we're not going to allow that, and we're firing you. And so there were 16 healthcare workers out of New York that did this case, and they've all now, lost their jobs, been fired, or it's a bad situation for not just the medical workers. Our military is facing this right now. I mean, this ridiculous deadline, kicking all these good men and women trying to serve us out of the military over the jab. But unfortunately, they did not. I wish they had taken that case, and I think Thomas was right. They should have done it now while we're not in an emergency situation anymore, because they basically said, oh, we'll deal with this in the future. I kind of warned about this one back when Barrett got nominated, because she had already had a decision at the Seventh Circuit that it looked like to me she was pretty pro-government doing all these things that it shouldn't be doing. It's not, healthcare is nowhere in the Constitution, and the federal government should have no say on any of this. And frankly, the states should be limited in what they do. We've never done what we did for the last 2 years. This has been horrible, and it didn't work, right? So it kind of showed people government cannot save you from a virus, so we shouldn't shut down Earth to try to save ourselves from it. So we cost more lives and more money than ever in history by government action. And it didn't stop the virus at all. It was kind of like the Great Depression, where the government stepped in, did all these programs, and just made it worse. That's right. That aside, Kennedy versus Bremerton School District. That was a pretty significant one. Oh, man, and such a good one. Randy, we prayed about this kind of stuff for a long time, because we've seen really a persecution. Our mutual friend Kelly Shackelford over at First Liberty that had the Kennedy case, and he said for years they've always released their hostility against Christianity report, and people would laugh at us and say, "Oh, y'all, yes, there's no hostility towards Christianity." It has gotten so bad in a lot of these places where you have to hide your faith to keep your job. And that's the opposite of how it should be in America. And we shouldn't say to someone, "Oh, you got to go to that, secret closet over there if you want to do the sign of the cross, or you want to pray, or any of that kind of stuff," because it might offend someone if they see you exercising your faith. Well, just a reminder to everybody, the Declaration of Independence does not say life, liberty, and to never be offended. And the court said that in this case. Gorsuch was very adamant about it. He didn't say it that way, but he basically said, seeing other people live out their faith is a great reminder that we live in a free country, and a great reminder to respect other people, having their faith as well. I've walked up to airline, getting on a plane and seen a Muslim with their, the carpet mat thing out and doing their thing, their mat, and doing their thing. And I'm like, hey, more power. You're more bold than most Christians. You're willing to do that right here and there. We should respect that kind of stuff and people living out their faith. And that's what the court said here. So this was a big one. What's sad, man? It took 7 years. So this guy could have been pouring into kids and doing a great job as a coach, and prevented from being able to be a great member of society and the community at that school, because of this overzealous, We got to remove religion from the culture. But it's Romans 1, man. They did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God. That's what's been happening since the 47 Everson case. So this one's a big one, and I think we'll see more dominoes fall. Again, didn't go quite as far as I would like it to go, but it was a huge victory for what they were actually deciding in the case.
Yeah, okay. And just for people that are not quite familiar with it, this is a coach who knelt on the football field after a game and prayed by himself for 15 seconds. Now, other students for a while were coming and praying with him. They were not forced to. It was purely voluntary. There was no repercussion if they didn't. They didn't get benched if they didn't come pray with the coach. If he wasn't doing it for any of those reasons. School told him to quit doing that with the students, so he did. So he's like, it's just me. And he went out by himself and knelt for a few seconds. And was he even vocal? I think he was praying quietly, if I'm correct, but correct me if I'm wrong. And the school fired him. And I'm curious, you said they didn't go far enough. What did they not do that you would like to see them do?
I wish they would completely reverse this whole endorsement of religion idea. I don't think that a kid praying, the Santa Fe case is the one I wish they had gotten rid of the ruling in Santa Fe and it came out of Texas, where a girl gets up and she's elected by her peers. So the kids elect another kid to welcome people to the football game, and if they want to pray, they can pray. And if it's a Christian prayer, great. If it's something else, it's up to the kid. And for all these years, we've said you can't even have that, because if it's on the school microphone, it's an endorsement of religion, or it's somehow an establishment of religion. How does one person praying on the school microphone, or even giving a speech about their testimony, how does that establish a religion? The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This case focused on prohibiting the free exercise thereof. They were prohibiting this coach from exercising his faith while people did secular things, between the time the game was over and they were going to the bus or the field house or whatever. You could be on your phone, you could be talking to your family, but you couldn't pray. Well, that's clearly what the court said was a violation. What I wish they would also say is it's not an establishment of a religion. It's not a congressional law for a staff member that's even if they do work for the school, or a student to pray or exercise their faith even on the microphone or whatever school property. So that I wish we would get back to that point where religion wasn't shunned like it is. But at least in this case, you're allowed to exercise your faith as an employee of the school district. They still have some limitations, you can't disrupt and all that kind of stuff, which they're not doing. But anyway, I think we can get there, though. I think the things they say in this case are hints towards future decisions to get rid of, again, these crazy tests. This was the lemon test. They got rid of that, but some of the other endorsement tests and establishment tests, it's, again, just these complicated legal theories. It ought to be, are they making you become an Anglican or not? Are they making you join the Catholic Church or not? If they're just expressing their faith, you get a chance to express your faith. Yeah. That's freedom. That's what we should embrace.
Yeah. Oh, the marketplace of ideas. There's a novel thought. All right. Lastly and quickly, because I know I need to let you go, but we got to at least say something about a couple of different gun cases. Do we have the right to defend ourselves now nationwide? Do I read that correctly?
Well, praise God, the people of New York and California and Hawaii and these other may-issue states that would not let people have the right to keep and bear arms like the Second Amendment says, they finally will have to do that. And the court hinted at this a while back, Gorsuch and Thomas both. But the whole idea here is, in the Heller case and the McDonald case, we went from, okay, you can definitely have a gun in your house, so you have the right to keep a gun, and it applies to the states. That's what McDonald said. Now, this case says you definitely have the right to keep and bear arms. And they really laid out, this is one of the things we've been teaching at Patriot Academy for years, but the real purpose of the Second Amendment is, as John Adams said, resistance to sudden violence, being able to protect yourself in the moment, present that firearm, and stop a crime from happening. That happens about 2 million times a year in America, by the way. Guns are used to stop a crime about 5 times as often as they're used to commit a crime. So if we did want to focus on the gun itself, more guns, less crime, as John Lott would say. But the case specifically said, if you not only have a right to have that gun at home, you have the right to carry it on your person wherever you go in public, because you're more likely to be attacked there. And it's about the right of self-defense. They did leave the little wiggle room where they said states could ban it in sensitive places, like they listed schools and and government buildings. Now, I wish they hadn't done that because I think you ought to have the right to carry everywhere. And I think we need more teachers carrying and more principals carrying, trained and carrying. We do a lot of training for folks, and we'll train teachers for free, by the way, if they can carry at their school. But it's a huge case, a really, really good step towards restoring the Second Amendment and saying to states, you cannot take away that individual's right to keep and bear arms. New York hates it. Of course, the governor came out immediately. and she was the first one to be whining about, I don't think these judges should be making these decisions for us. She's saying what we've been saying for years. and in this case, what the decision they were making for them was uphold the Constitution. And of course, the funny thing is, not funny, it's sad. I mean, she thinks that their laws are stopping crime, and yet it's one of the worst crime states in the country. And the whole Buffalo shooting, you know what? In fact, Sam Alito asked that in his concurring opinion in here. He asked the dissent, the three judges that were against the decision. He asked them, why are you listing all of these mass murder events and listing Buffalo and saying that the laws in New York would stop mass murder events when it happened in Buffalo with these laws on the books? So they don't understand common sense and logic. But the good news is this case restored constitutional right to keep and bear arms to all Americans.
Yeah, I'm guessing you've been to a kid's junior high or high school sporting event, soccer or football. I don't know that I would trust all those parents to be carrying a weapon, but I hear you.
As long as they come through my training, no.
As they go through training, I mean, honestly, the only way that works is if they're surrounded by 5 other guys with guns, which makes a lot of people nervous. I mean, I grew up around guns, so I get it. We used to see them when we walk into the feed store, or the hunting store. You carry your rifle over your shoulder in there, but I don't know, man. If we're gonna have that many guns out there, a lot of training needs to take place. I will say that.
And I'm a big advocate for that. I always tell people, listen, I'll die for your constitutional right to carry a gun, whether you're trained or not. But you need to get trained. I mean, people that carry and aren't trained, first of all, they're not going to perform well. They're probably going to end up hurting somebody. Yeah. The shooting, in Texas there in White Settlement that happened a couple of years ago at that church, you had a good guy without a gun, killed. You had a good guy with a gun that couldn't get his gun out, killed. And then you had a good guy that was trained, a trained good guy with a gun, Jack Wilson, from 20 yards away, presented his firearm and ended the threat immediately. In West Virginia, the day after Uvalde. So in Uvalde, the dirtbag's able to walk around killing kids for an hour and 19 minutes. And in West Virginia, the sheepdog with a ponytail, this lady takes out her handgun and kills the bad guy immediately. He was going to kill 40 people. He was shooting up a crowd of 40 people, and she takes him out immediately. Yep. So the only person that died was the bad guy. That's a good headline. That's the way it ought to be. But we've got to be smart about this. And Proverbs says, that you're a fool if you walk blindly on, you suffer the consequences, but you're the prudent, wise person if you foresee danger and take precautions. So I tell everybody, get trained. Don't be like I was when I was in the legislature. I was known as the God and Guns guy because I passed a lot of good Second Amendment legislation, but I didn't carry my weapon because I wasn't trained. And so then I started getting trained and I realized, wow, I needed this training to be able to defend my family in the moment. Yeah. So I really encourage people to do that.
Yeah. That West Virginia thing was very interesting. It was a graduation party in a park, and a guy opened fire on him, and that woman stopped him right there. I don't think she killed him. I think she just stopped him. So.
In seconds. In seconds. Because think about it, in minutes, how many people can die? Whether it's a gun or a Chevy Suburban, if you're a dedicated murderer, that dedicated murderer is you've got to be able to stop the threat immediately or they're going to take life. Yeah. Most of these mass murder events are 5 minutes. I think Buffalo was 6 or 7 minutes. Some of these school incidents. I mean, even Sandy Hook was 10 minutes. So it doesn't take long. Parkland, I think, was 10 minutes. And that's why, you could be SEAL Team 6 trying to descend on the building and get in there. It'd be far better if there was a custodian or principal or teacher or someone armed and the perpetrator doesn't know who's armed. So if they're concealed, right now, the gun-free zones are an invitation to this. They actually advertise to the mass murderer, come here. The guy in Buffalo even said that in his manifesto. He chose that place because he was a racist. He wanted to kill as many black people as he could, but also because he said they're likely not to have any guns there because of the New York laws. And if they do, they'll have low capacity guns. So I'll be able to outgun them. So, they're crazy, but they're not stupid. And we need to be smart and wise as well. And this side of heaven, you're always going to have mass murder events, usually by government if you go into history, but you're always going to have a crazy person come along, and we have to be wise about how to stop that threat and save lives.
All right, trivia question for you, Rick Green. America's Constitution coach, co-host of Wall Builders Live with David Barton. I have a question for you. When the Second Amendment was passed, could you own a cannon?
100% yes. The president has been lying to the American people.
Why,
you know, it's
why
so
does he
funny.
keep saying that?
It's so silly. No, it's so silly. And I think what happened was Obama made that one up, I think, like 10 years ago. And he just kind of picked it up and he says it all the time. I mean, we have the only ordinances we can find say that if you have your cannon, don't fire it late at night in town because you're waking people up. So, I mean, the whole idea was you should be able, it was supposed to be whatever the weapon of war was,
right.
You should be able to have that because you are going to have to defend against government. It's not just for self-defense in the moment against a bad guy that shows up.
Oh, yeah.
They said this is Joseph Story, the father of American jurisprudence, said it offers a strong moral check against the arbitrary usurpation of power. In other words, when the people are armed and they're able to defend against tyranny, it prevents the tyranny from happening in the first place, or even an attempt to the tyranny. That was the whole concept. And it worked really well for most of our history. But yeah, I mean, you absolutely could have a cannon in the founding era. I kind of wish I had a tank these days, but anyway.
Oh, Lord, you're one of those guys. Okay. Is there anything else, man, you want to mention? I appreciate your time and your insight on this. I think this is very helpful for people to understand, and certainly you and I are both glad that we're returning to a more of a constitutional interpretation of law as opposed to this arbitrary creation of law. But is there anything that you want to add before I let you go?
Amen. I just want to say to everybody out there, realize this takes time and celebrate this moment. Realize that freedom is the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Clarence Thomas has been on the court for 31 years, laboring in the minority, most of the time writing, minority dissents, not majority opinions. Sam Alito's been there 16 years in the same way. At times they were disheartened, wanted to leave and do something else. Stay in the fight, in the culture, be good Caesar, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. And in America, we are Caesar, we the people. So learn how to be a good Caesar by learning the Bible and what it says about society and how you ought to form your neighborhoods and your country, and then learn how to be a good citizen under our Constitution and stay in it no matter how long it takes. Be like Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito and have that staying power, and eventually we'll get to those victories.
Love it. Appreciate you, man. Keep it up. And
God bless you, man.
Anybody wants to learn more about what Rick's doing, you can go to patriotacademy.com and check out what's going on. So appreciate you. We'll see you again. Have a great 4th of July. I'll see you next week.